A woman led a limping horse up to the gate. She stopped there and read the rust on the latch, uncertain, like it might not apply to her. A small, scrappy dog, mud-colored and missing half an ear, circled her feet, sniffing the gatepost with real suspicion. "Is this the place, Mama?" "Brand matches. Has to be." The boy reached for the latch before she could stop him, small and sure of himself. "I will just take him in myself." "Fen, wait, not our gate to open." Fen frowned, let his hand fall, and kept his eyes on the latch a moment longer. He was 8 years old and made of opinions. Inside the house, Callum Weyden heard it. Voices at a gate that had not been touched by a stranger in 6 years. He was on his feet before he had decided to be. Out onto the porch and across the yard and standing at the gate from his own side of it. A woman, a boy, and a dog already digging at his fence post, and his own horse, leaning easy into the woman's hand. The woman was an orc. Tall, steady, with the deep green skin of the northern clans, long dark hair tied back practical and amber eyes that held his without blinking. She wore traveling clothes that had been mended too many times and a coat that had belonged to someone larger, and she held Rowan's lead with the easy grip of a person who has handled horses her whole life. The boy at her side was the same green, same eyes, same chin, with the particular defiance of a child who has been told too many times to wait and has stopped agreeing with the policy. "Obliged," Callum said, rough from disuse, "for bringing him back." Fen looked up at him, unbothered by the size of the man in front of him. "Mama said you would look at us like we stole him." He said it plain, reporting a fact rather than an accusation. She said men who keep their gates shut that long usually think the world owes them an apology first. "Fen." Maren's hand came down on his shoulder. "Not hard, just telling." "He is just repeating what you said. Did not know whose he was," Maren said to Callum. "Until I saw the brand." Callum reached over and worked the latch himself. The gate swung open for the first time in 6 years, and the rust that had held it screamed once and let go. The sound carried across the yard and out over the pasture. A small, sharp noise that should not have meant anything, and meant everything. Neither of them moved to close it again. Burr trotted through it immediately, as if gates were a concept that had never applied to him personally, and began investigating the yard with the focused urgency of a creature who has important work to do and no time to explain it to anyone. If this story finds you somewhere warm tonight, do one small thing for me. Write in the comments which town the winter finds you in. Now, back to the gate. Callum Weyden was 48 years old and had been alone on that land 6 years, which was long enough that the silence had stopped being a thing he noticed and had become a thing he was. His wife Lena had died of a fever that took her in 10 days and left him with a house full of her things and no idea what to do with any of them. Her paintings were stacked in the upstairs room. Her garden had gone to weeds behind the barn. And Rowan, the dark horse that had just walked home with an orc woman's hand on his neck, had been Lena's before he was Callum's. She had broken him herself out of a colt too wild for anybody else to sit, and when she died the horse had grieved in his own way, going off his feed for a week, standing at the fence looking down the road like he expected her to come walking up it. The clan wars had ended a generation back, but the burned plains to the west and the hollowed holds to the north were still part of the country's memory, and in Thornfield, the nearest town, most folk kept their opinions about orcs the way they kept their rifles, loaded and close to hand. Callum had shut his gate after Lena died, and the shutting had not been about orcs or humans or anybody in particular. It had been about the fact that every person who came through it wanted to talk about her, and he could not stand one more conversation that began with, "How are you holding up?" and ended with him saying fine when nothing about him was fine. So he stopped opening the gate. And eventually people stopped coming to it. The way people stop coming to a door they have been turned away from enough times. The rust grew on the latch. The garden went to weeds. The house got quieter and quieter, until the quiet was just the sound of Callum Weyden, living alone inside a decision he had made once, and never found a reason to unmake. The horses were the only company he kept, and Rowan was the closest thing to a conversation he had most days, because the horse had known Lena too, and did not need anything explained. Their wagon had thrown a wheel a mile back. Callum walked with them to it, and crouched beside the crack that ran clean through the spoke. While he worked, Burr found a patch of dirt near the roadside and dug at it with total conviction. "He does that everywhere we go," Maren said, apologetic, buries things, digs up other things, never explains himself. Sounds like a dog with priorities. Fen laughed, surprised into it, the quick, bright laugh of a child who did not expect this particular adult to be funny. "We have got land not far from here," Maren said once the wheel was set. "Claimed it 3 weeks back. House on it is not fit to sleep in yet." Callum considered this. "There is an old line shack out past my east pasture. Roof is solid, stove works. Fair trade for whatever work you can put in, not charity." "We accept," Maren said. They settled the shack that same afternoon. Fen claimed the bed by the window, and Burr claimed the foot of it. Callum lit the stove before he left, without being asked. He brought extra blankets from the house, a kettle, and a bag of coffee, and set them inside the door. Maren watched him do it with an expression he could not read. "Thank you," she said. He nodded and went back across the yard, and the walk felt longer than it should have, the way a walk feels when you are leaving people behind and are not sure you want to. That first night, once Fen had gone to sleep, Maren took a small worn book from her trunk. Its pages were thick with pressed flowers and leaves, most already dry and flat, each one labeled in careful handwriting with a place name and a date. She smoothed a fresh page and pressed a single wildflower into it, one she had picked from the roadside that afternoon, without quite deciding why. Beneath it she wrote the name of the ranch and the date. Fen, not quite asleep after all, watched her from the bed. "Why do you do that?" "So we remember," Maren said. "Every place we have been, so none of it disappears entirely, even the places we do not stay. Are we staying here? Do not know yet." She closed the book gentle, meaning to open it again soon. "Go to sleep, Fen." The days took on a rhythm. Maren worked with a quiet, relentless energy that told Callum she had been working hard her entire life and had simply never had a place that noticed. She had the stove going, and coffee started before he crossed the yard each morning. "Did not have to," he said. The coffee was better than his. Stronger. Cleaner, with a steadiness to it that told him she had been making coffee for people a long time and had stopped thinking about whether they noticed. "Know that," she said. "Idle hands worry more than busy ones do." Fen found the corral on the second day and watched Rowan with plain, unhurried attention. "He favors you," Fen told Callum. "More than most horses favor anybody. Did once for somebody else, too," Callum said, and offered nothing more, and Fen understood there was a door there, better left shut a while longer. Burr, meanwhile, declared war on the ranch. He slept on Callum's good saddle blanket, despite repeated relocations to the porch. He claimed the porch rocking chair with such conviction that Callum spent an entire evening on the step instead. Evicted from his own furniture by an animal with no business winning arguments. Burr planted all 4 paws when Fen tried to move him, and fixed Callum with the wounded dignity of an animal being asked to leave land he considered rightfully his. Every household, it seemed, eventually lost some small argument to an animal too little to have any business winning it, and one afternoon he made off with a glove from Callum's saddlebag and pranced just out of reach across half the yard until Fen tackled him near the water trough, and Callum laughed before he thought to catch it. The first real laugh that house had heard in 6 years. It was around that same week that Fen's boots gave out. The left sole had split clean along the seam, and the boy had taken to wrapping it with twine. Callum noticed on a Tuesday and crouched to check the boy's foot without asking permission first. That will not hold past the week. Got hide glue in the barn. Might buy you another month. They sat together on an overturned crate outside the tack room that evening, Callum working the glue into the split sole while Fen held the boot steady. And Fen, as he often did when a grown man's full attention was finally on him, began to talk. My father had leather boots too. Good ones. Burr used to sleep right on top of them every night. Callum kept his eyes on the sole. Your father leave? 2 years back, Fen said. Plain, picking at a splinter on the crate's edge. No weight in his voice at all. None that he seemed to notice himself. Packed up on a Wednesday. Did not come back Thursday or any day after that. Mama says some men just run out of staying power partway through. Says it is better to find that out early than late. Callum's hands went still over the boot a long moment. He thought about his own father, who had stayed, who had fixed every pair of boots he owned, and built every fence on the place, and never once considered leaving, and who had died in the same house he was born in, and Callum had not been there for it. Because he had been driving cattle somewhere 3 counties over, and the letter had reached him 11 days late. Whoever taught you that much sense at your age, he said finally, did a fair job of it. Fen considered that a serious compliment, and said nothing more, and the two of them finished the boot in a quiet that had stopped feeling like the kind either of them needed to fill. 4 days later, Callum felt a little heat beneath Rowan's jaw, faint dampness around one nostril. He said nothing that night, but found himself back at the barn twice more before going to bed. Past midnight, a lantern still moved in the barn. Maren watched from her window, then crossed the yard. She found him sitting on an overturned bucket beside the stall, one hand on the horse's neck. Something is wrong, she said. Not a question. Heat under his jaw since yesterday. Told myself it was nothing. This was her horse, Maren, before he was mine. Lena broke him herself out of a colt too wild for anybody else to sit. Everybody told her the horse was mean, that he would never be worth the trouble, and she just kept coming back to the corral every morning until he stopped fighting her. Took her the better part of a year. She said the horse was not mean. She said he was just afraid, and afraid and mean look the same from the outside, but they are not the same thing at all. He paused. If something has got hold of him now. He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Maren understood what the horse meant to this man. It was the last living thing that remembered his wife, and if it died, the house would be quieter than even Callum could bear. Maren knelt and ran her hand along the horse's jaw, feeling for the swelling. Keep him separate tonight, she said. I have seen this shape of trouble before. I would rather be wrong from caution than right from carelessness. Word reached a rancher named Garrett Polk within 2 days, and he did not wait for confirmation. He rode to the county seat and returned with a livestock inspector named Kessler, carrying a satchel of forms, not medicine. County has had reports of contagious sickness moving through local herds, Kessler said at the gate. Traced back, according to the complaint filed, to this property, to an animal of uncertain origin residing here. He glanced at Burr. Strays are known carriers. The dog has got nothing to do with a sickness that spreads horse to horse, Maren said, steady despite the color rising in her face. County protocol allows for destruction of exposed animals where the source cannot be established. 10 days, Kessler said. If the true source is confirmed, the order lapses. If not, the exposed animals must be surrendered. Fenn came down off the porch steps faster than anyone expected, and Burr was right with him, pressed close against his leg the way the dog always was when something was wrong, because Burr always knew when something was wrong. You cannot make him leave, Fenn said. He did not do anything. Fenn, he did not do anything, Mama. His voice cracked on it. The first real crack he had shown since arriving. The crack of a boy who has been brave for too long and has just found the edge of what bravery can hold. Everybody always finds a reason somebody has to leave, he said. I am tired of it being true. The words hung in the cold air. Maren knelt and pulled her son close, and Burr wedged himself between them as though he understood exactly what was at stake. And the three of them stayed like that while the men rode away. A mother and a boy and a half-eared dog, holding on to each other in the yard of a man who had only just started letting people through his gate again. That same afternoon, Polk rode up to the boundary fence while Callum was setting a post. He did not dismount. Town is asking questions, Weyden. Polk said it looking past Callum toward the wash line where Maren's shirts hung drying. Widow living 50 yards off your porch. An orc, no less. No husband, no papers. A dog nobody can account for. Folks wonder what kind of arrangement that is. Storekeeper's wife was saying she might stop extending credit under your name if the orc woman was still using it. Callum set his post-hole digger down slow and deliberate. They are tenants working the land off honest. That is one word for it. Polk's mouth curled. Callum stepped up to the wire until he stood almost beneath the horse's head. Maren Bennett has not asked this county for one thing it did not owe her twice over already, Callum said quietly. And if I hear you carrying that kind of talk across my fence line again, Polk, I will not stop at the fence to settle it. Polk held his eyes a moment, then looked away first and rode off faster than the errand had required. They started that same night. Maren spread her notes across the kitchen table. Every ranch she knew of that had reported sickness, every date, every detail. Callum pulled a chair up beside her. They worked past midnight, the lamp burning low between them, matching names to dates, drawing lines between ranches on a rough map Callum sketched on the back of an old feed receipt. It was the kind of work that brings two people close without either of them noticing, shoulders nearly touching, voices dropped to murmurs, the particular intimacy of a shared problem. Once they reached for the same page at the same moment. Their hands met on the paper, his rough and brown, hers green and calloused, and neither moved away immediately, and neither mentioned it after, and the moment sat between them the rest of the night like a door that had opened a crack and was waiting to see whether anyone would walk through it. The investigation took days. Maren rode out to neighboring ranches. Fenn overheard a boy at the schoolhouse mention that his uncle had bought a horse off a trader passing through the same week. She traced it. 4 ranches, 1 trader, the same contaminated troughs. Strangles, she confirmed over Rowan's stall. Ugly sickness. Not always fatal if caught in time. She stayed with the horse 3 nights, checking his breathing every quarter hour, applying warm cloths, keeping the fever from climbing. She slept in short stretches against the stall wall, her shawl pulled tight, waking at every shift in the horse's breathing. Fenn appeared in the barn doorway one dawn, blanket trailing behind him, Burr at his heels. Is he going to be all right? Going to do everything we can to see that he is, Maren said, not promising more than that. Fenn came and sat beside her without being invited. Burr settled at the stall door, uncharacteristically solemn. "He knows something is wrong," Fen said, watching the dog. "He always knows." On the third night, Callum found Maren there past 2 in the morning, curled against the boards, the cold already reaching her through her shawl. He fetched a blanket from the house and laid it over her carefully, built up the small stove in the barn corner, and sat across from her with his back against the opposite wall. When she stirred an hour later, disoriented, there was a cup of tea gone lukewarm on the crate beside her, and Callum asleep sitting upright across from her, having refused to leave her to the watch alone. On the morning of the 10th day, Callum stood at the gate before Kessler's party had come into view. Maren beside him with her notes gathered in one hand. Fen behind them, fur against his legs. Maren stepped forward and spread her notes across the wagon seat. 4 ranches, she said. 1 trader passing through 3 weeks back. The same contaminated water in trough after trough. Every timeline matches. Every case traces back to the same source, and none of them trace to this property or to the dog. She looked directly at Kessler. Not one. Kessler examined the notes a long moment, turning pages, comparing dates. "This is thorough," he admitted. "More thorough than the complaint that brought me out here in the first place." He looked at Polk. "Did you verify any of this independently before filing against this property specifically?" Polk's face went the color of old plaster, filed against the animal folks we're talking about, he said. "Obvious is not the same as correct," Kessler said. "Order is rescinded, effective immediately." Polk lingered after. "Was wrong," he said, brief and gruff. "About the dog. About you." "Obliged for saying so," Maren replied. Plain, without triumph. In the weeks that followed, Rowan mended steadily under Maren's care, and word spread that the orc woman at the Weyden ranch could nurse a horse through strangles better than the county veterinarian. Neighboring ranchers came, one by one, hats in hand. The first was a nervous young man named Whitfield, pacing his yard in open panic. "Do not know the first thing about treating this," he admitted. Maren was already moving. She showed him how to reduce the swelling, how to keep the horse from spreading the sickness through shared water, how to tell real danger from ordinary discomfort. After Whitfield came Hollis, whose mare had it worse, and Maren worked through the night with Fen holding the lamp steady over her shoulder, without flinching. "Good hands," she told him when the worst had passed. "Did not flinch once. Feels different helping something get better instead of just watching it go wrong," Fen said. And Maren had no answer ready for that, and let the silence sit. She helped every one of them, never asking for coin, accepting what they could give, eggs, flour, sometimes just a word of thanks. And slowly, the way water wears a stone, the county began to turn. Old Ferris at the store spoke up loud enough for everyone to hear. "Watched that woman nurse a horseback with steadier hands than most grown men in this county could manage. Seems to me that ought to count for something louder than gossip." A few days later, Maren knelt at the edge of a garden row she had not touched since the day she first found it behind the barn. Callum came and knelt across from her without being asked. "That was hers," he said. "My wife's garden. Have not touched it myself, going on 6 years now. Did not think it belonged to nobody," Maren said, not looking up. "Ground like that does not go to seed on its own account. Somebody loved it once." She glanced up at him. "Not fixing the whole of it, Callum, just this one row." He did not stop her. He knelt beside her and began clearing the weeds from his side, and the two of them worked the row together in silence for the better part of an hour, and the working was its own kind of conversation, the kind that does not need words because the hands are saying everything. When they finished, the row was dark and clean and ready for planting, and it looked, for the first time in 6 years, like a place something could grow in again. Both of them understood what was being said in it. Some nights after that, he finally told her the rest. They stood at Rowan's stall long after the horse had settled. Was not the losing itself that shut the gate, Callum said. His voice was low and careful, the way voices get when they are carrying something that has been sitting in the dark a long time. Was everyone after? Meaning well. Every last one of them meaning well. Wanting to talk about her like talking about her fixed anything. Wanting me to say I was getting better, so they could feel better about not knowing what to do. I could not stand one more person telling me she was in a better place, when the only place I wanted her was here. He looked at the horse, then at the floor. Easier to close the gate than keep saying I did not know how I was holding up. 10 days ago, standing in that gap with Kessler riding up, I understood something for the first time since she died. I was more afraid of losing what was standing behind me than I had ever been of the grief itself. He looked at her. That is when I knew the gate was not protecting me anymore. It was just keeping me from the only thing worth walking toward. Maren sat with that before answering. That is not so different from what 6 towns taught me, she said. Every place we settled, it started the same. People were polite for a week, sometimes 2. Then somebody would say something about the green, about the tusks, about the boy. And the politeness would curdle, and we would pack the wagon before the curdling turned to something worse. 6 towns in 2 years. Easier to leave first some days than wait to be told to. She looked at the horse, then at him. Suspect I have stopped believing that since arriving here. Fen had his own quiet reckoning that same week, catching Callum alone at the corral. Are we staying? For real this time? Cannot promise nothing will ever go wrong again, Fen, but whatever goes wrong here, we work it together, same as we just did. Nobody packs a wagon over it. Fen nodded, satisfied, and turned to go back to his chores. Thanks, Pa, he said, already 3 steps gone, the word out of him plain and easy before he seemed to catch what he had said at all. He stopped. His shoulders went stiff. I meant Callum. Sorry, I did not mean. Thought you already knew, Callum said quiet, and went back to mending the rail. Fen stood a moment longer, some of the stiffness going out of him slow, the way a fist unclenches when it realizes there is nothing left to fight. Then he went on to his chores after all, lighter than he had been walking up, and Callum stood at the rail with his hands very still and his throat very tight, and thought about all the ways a man can be found by the things he stopped looking for. That evening, Maren pressed a single flower from the newly cleared garden row into her book. Beneath it she wrote nothing but the date, no place name at all. Callum found her at the window a little later, the book open on the sill. He set something beside it. A bird, carved rough but careful from a scrap of the garden's old fence post, the wood still carrying the faint green of weather and age. It was not a pretty thing. It was an honest thing, made by hands more used to mending fence than shaping wood, and it leaned a little to the left, and that made it perfect. Made you something for it, he said. Figured a page ought to exist for a place that means to keep you. Not just one you are passing through. Maren looked at the carving, then at him. Is that a page for us, then, or a plea for one? Both, if you will have it. He took her hand. Marry me, Maren, so the book never needs another page at all, because there will not be anywhere left worth pressing flowers about once we are already exactly where we mean to stay. Yes, she said, without hesitation, and the word came out steady and whole, the way a word comes out when a person has been waiting to say it and has finally been asked. I believe that is exactly what I want. He pulled her close, and she let him. And the book sat open on the sill beside the rough-carved bird, and neither of them said anything more for a while, because the silence had finally stopped being the kind that needed filling and had become the kind that two people share when they are exactly where they mean to be. Fen looked from Maren to Callum. Does this mean Burr gets his own proper bed instead of stealing mine every night? It means Burr gets whatever bed he decides is his, Callum said. 3 weeks later, many of the same faces gathered for the wedding in Callum's yard, more people than it had seen in 6 years. Whitfield brought flowers from his own garden. Old Ferris stood near the front and wept openly without apology. The storekeeper's wife dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief she claimed was only there for the dust. Even Polk came, standing quiet near the back. A man who had been wrong and knew it and had decided to be present anyway, which is its own kind of courage, and he offered a stiff nod when Callum caught his eye, and Callum returned it. Because some debts are settled not by words, but by showing up. That night, once the gathering had thinned, and the last lanterns had bobbed away down the road, Callum walked to the gate. Maren followed without being asked. He looked at the gate a long moment, the rust still showing where the latch had held for 6 years, the wood weathered gray, the hinges stiff. Then he lifted it clean off its hinges and set it against the barn wall. It was heavier than he expected, or maybe it had always been that heavy and he had just stopped noticing. No longer needed at all. Maren stood beside him in the gap where the gate had been, and the road ran through it, open now, the way a road is supposed to be, and neither of them said anything, because the gesture had said it. Maren stood beside him. The rust still showed where the latch had held for 6 years. Callum looked at the empty gap where the gate had been, and at the road that ran through it, open now, the way a road is supposed to be. Later, Maren opened her book one last time and pressed a single leaf from the newly tended garden between its pages. She labeled it with the ranch's name and no date at all, since some places she had finally let herself believe were not meant to be measured by how long you had already stayed, but by how long you intended to. Fen stood on the porch with Burr planted firmly on the rocking chair beside him, the dog having won that particular battle so completely that nobody even pretended to contest it anymore. "We are home," Fen said. "We are actually home." His boots, scuffed now from a full season of proper wear, sat by the door each night beside Callum's own. Burr yawned, turned once on the chair, and settled with the absolute conviction of a creature who had never for one moment doubted it. And in the book on the windowsill, the last page held a single pressed leaf from the garden, labeled with the ranch's name and no date at all, because some places are not measured by how long you have already stayed, but by how long you intend to. And that was enough. If this story stayed with you, tell me one thing in the comments. When Fen said thanks Pa and then caught himself, what do you think Callum felt in that 1 second before he answered? I read every comment, and if you want more tales from the Greywater country, subscribe, because the hearth here always keeps a cup for you.